The Confederate guard was 10 feet away when Harriet Tubman realized her head wrap had slipped loose. Her dark skin caught the moonlight as she pressed against the tent wall, clutching the stolen battle plans to her chest. One wrong move, one sound, one glance in her direction, and she would hang at sunrise. But Harriet Tubman had come too far to turn back now. The fate of 2,000 Union soldiers depended on what she did next, and she was about to make the most dangerous decision of her life. To understand how Harriet got here, you need to go back 3 weeks earlier. It was September 1863, and the Civil War was tearing America apart. Harriet had already made her name leading enslaved people to freedom through the Underground Railroad. But now, she was being asked to do something that could cost her everything. Colonel Montgomery, the weathered Union commander with gray eyes that had seen too much war, found her at their South Carolina camp. "Harriet," he said, removing his hat respectfully, "we need your help with something that could change the course of this war." She looked up from mending her worn boots. "What kind of help, Colonel?" "The kind that could get you killed," he said quietly, "but also the kind that could save thousands of our boys." Harriet set down her needle. She'd learned long ago that when military men spoke like that, lives hung in the balance. As she always did before dangerous missions, she whispered a quick prayer. "Lord, if it be your will, give me strength to save these soldiers like you helped me save my people." But she had no idea what Montgomery was about to ask of her. Montgomery pulled out a rough map. "There's a Confederate camp about 20 miles south. General Beaumont, their top commander, has been planning something big. Our scouts can't get close enough." He paused, studying her face. "But you've moved through enemy territory before." "That was different," Harriet said. "I was helping my people escape. This is asking me to spy on trained soldiers." "Yes, it is," Montgomery admitted, "and I wouldn't ask if we had any other choice. But Harriet, if General Beaumont's planning what we think, our entire position could be overrun." The weight of his words settled over the tent. Harriet had seen what happened when Confederates retook territory. For someone like her who'd helped so many escape, it would be worse than death. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she said finally. "Get into that camp, find out what Beaumont's planning, and get back out alive." What Montgomery didn't tell her was how many Union spies had already tried and failed. She spent the next day preparing carefully. They provided her with a worn dress and applied ash to age her face. But the hardest part was changing her posture. Harriet Tubman carried herself like a woman who'd never bowed to anyone. But Sarah Johnson would have to be different. Submissive, frightened, broken, standing in front of a cracked mirror. Harriet practiced letting her shoulders slump, keeping her eyes down. It made her stomach turn, but it might keep her alive. The walk to the Confederate camp took her through 20 miles of rough country. By the time she reached the outskirts, it was nearly dark, and she was exhausted. That's when she realized the camp was much bigger than Montgomery had said. Then she heard the word that meant death. Papers. The first sentry was a red-haired boy who couldn't have been more than 16. When he raised his rifle, his hands were shaking. "Stop right there. State your business." Harriet let her voice tremble as Sarah Johnson. "Please, sir, I'm just trying to get back to Charleston. My master's family got separated when the Yankees came. You got papers?" This was the first test. "No, sir, everything got burned when they attacked the house." The boy seemed uncertain, but then a harder voice cut through the darkness. "What's the problem here, Private?" Captain Willis stepped into view, a suspicious, cold-eyed Confederate officer who looked at Harriet like she was something that had crawled from under a rock. This was the camp's security chief, and he trusted nobody. "So you walked 20 miles through Union territory, alone at night, and nobody stopped you?" Willis said slowly. Harriet kept her voice steady. "I hid during the day, sir, traveled at night. I know these woods from when I was a child." Willis studied her for a long moment. His next words would determine her fate. Then he nodded to the sentry. "Put her with the other refugees. We'll sort this out in the morning." As she was led away, Harriet caught her first glimpse of the main camp. What she saw made her blood run cold. This wasn't just a military encampment. This was an army preparing for major action. Artillery pieces positioned throughout, supply wagons loaded with ammunition, hundreds of soldiers, maybe more than 1,000. What really worried her was their positioning. Every heavy weapon pointed north, directly toward Union positions. But that wasn't the worst discovery waiting for her. The refugee area was a collection of ragged tents on the outskirts. About 20 people were gathered there, mostly women and children displaced by fighting. As the night wore on, Harriet learned the camp's routine. Guards changed every 4 hours. The command tent was heavily guarded. General Beaumont held briefings at dawn, but she also discovered something that made her mission infinitely more dangerous. Captain Willis, that suspicious security chief, hadn't believed her story. He'd sent word to Charleston to verify the Pemberton family. She had maybe 24 hours before that message came back, 24 hours to find out what General Beaumont was planning an escape. At dawn, everything changed. Willis was walking straight toward her tent, but when he reached her, he just nodded curtly. "Your story checks out for now, but I'm watching you." The next morning, as she helped prepare breakfast for the refugees, Harriet overheard two soldiers talking near their area. But as one turned to walk away, he nearly bumped into her. "Watch where you're going, girl," he snapped. Then to his friend, "General's meeting with his staff this morning, finalizing the attack plans. When's it supposed to happen?" "Day after tomorrow, before dawn. Hit them while they're sleeping." Harriet's hands stilled on the pot she was stirring. Day after tomorrow meant less time than she'd thought, and if the attack was at dawn, Union forces would be completely unprepared. She had to get to that command tent, but getting close during daylight seemed impossible. That's when she noticed something that would either save her mission or end her life. The laundry detail was her only chance, and within 10 minutes, it nearly got her killed. The camp's laundry was done by refugee women. It would give her reason to move around the camp, to get close to areas she otherwise couldn't access. She volunteered for laundry duty. The work allowed Harriet to move through the camp with purpose, observing layouts, counting soldiers and weapons. Most importantly, it got her close to the command tent. As she worked nearby, she could hear voices from inside General Beaumont's headquarters, but couldn't make out words. She needed to get closer, but every time she tried, a guard would appear. That evening she made a discovery that would either save thousands of lives or end hers. General Beaumont's personal orderly was a nervous young man named Private Stevens. She'd seen him throughout the day, running messages, fetching coffee for the general's staff, and she'd noticed something about him that gave her an idea. Harriet positioned herself along Stevens's evening route. When he came by carrying dishes, she stepped out and pretended to stumble, bumping into him lightly. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir," she said in her Sarah Johnson voice. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Stevens was flustered. "It's all right, no harm done." But in that moment, Harriet Tubman had slipped a small piece of paper into Stevens's jacket pocket. On it she'd written, "Your sister Mary in Richmond is worried about you." She mentioned little Thomas misses his uncle, a friend. It was a gamble that could get her hanged. The next morning, Stevens sought her out. "Excuse me, miss," he said quietly, "you mentioned my sister Mary yesterday. How do you know her?" Harriet's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm. "I was staying with a family in Richmond before coming south. Mary worked next door. Sweet girl, always worrying about her baby brother." Stevens's eyes lit up. "That's her. And Thomas, he's her boy. How did she look?" "She looked fine but worried sick about you. Made me promise if I ever met Confederate soldiers, I'd tell them to write home." "I haven't written in weeks," Stevens admitted. "Been so busy with the general's preparations for the attack." He stopped, realizing he'd said too much. But Harriet had heard enough. "Should be finished by Thursday, God willing," he added quietly. Thursday was 2 days away, and Harriet still didn't know what the attack would be. That evening Harriet made her move. She'd spent the day watching guard patterns around the command tent, timing rotations, identifying brief windows when it was less observed. At 2 a.m., when the camp was quietest, she slipped out of her refugee tent and began moving toward the center of the camp. She made it within 50 feet of the command tent when a guard dog caught her scent and began barking. Harriet had maybe 30 seconds before they found her. 30 seconds to either complete her mission or abandon it forever. Instead of running, she made the decision that would define the rest of the night. She moved toward the command tent. Using a small knife hidden in her dress, Harriet carefully cut a slit near the bottom of the tent wall and squeezed through. The papers on the table were exactly what Colonel Montgomery needed. Battle plans showing troop positions, attack routes, timing. They weren't just planning to attack the Union position, they were planning to sweep north, taking 3 more Union strongholds that would change the entire war. But as she reached for the papers, she heard heavy footsteps approaching. General Beaumont was returning. Harriet grabbed the most important documents and stuffed them inside her dress, but there wasn't time to escape through the slit. The tent flap opened and General Beaumont entered with 2 officers. In the lamplight, she could see he was a big man with a gray beard. "Gentlemen," Beaumont said, "I want to review the timing one more time. The attack begins at 4 a.m. Thursday." As they talked, Harriet realized something terrifying. In her haste to grab papers, she'd knocked over an inkwell. A dark stain was spreading across the table. Then came the words she'd been dreading. "Where's the ammunition inventory? Where's the ammunition inventory?" Beaumont asked suddenly. It was right here. The officers began searching around the tent, and their search was bringing them closer to where Harriet was hidden. She made the most desperate decision of her life. As the officers searched one side, she quietly moved to the tent flap and slipped outside. But instead of running, she did something that was either pure genius or insanity. She started screaming, "Help! Help! There's someone in the general's tent! I saw someone in there!" The entire camp erupted. In war camps, panic spreads like wildfire. In the chaos, with soldiers rushing around with torches, Harriet managed to blend into the crowd, responding to the emergency. "Where did you see them?" Captain Willis, the suspicious security chief, demanded, grabbing her shoulder. "Inside the tent, sir," she said, pointing and shaking with very real fear. "I was walking back from relieving myself, and I saw a shadow moving inside." The search that followed was thorough and frantic. They found the slit in the tent wall. They found the ink stain where papers had been disturbed. But they never found the intruder, because the intruder was standing right there with them, playing the helpful witness. But Harriet wasn't safe yet. She still had to escape the camp and reach Union lines with the intelligence. Morning brought the manhunt she'd feared. Every refugee was questioned again. Willis himself came to interrogate her. The next morning brought new challenges. The theft had made everyone suspicious. Guards were checking everyone more carefully. Movement was restricted. That afternoon, Harriet made her final decision. She would use the laundry detail as her cover to get outside the camp perimeter. The next morning, despite having slept only 2 hours, she volunteered for early laundry duty. 4 women and 1 guard walked to the creek about a quarter-mile away. When she was about 100 yards from the group working downstream, she slipped into the woods quietly. Harriet began running through the woods, using every skill from her Underground Railroad days. She stayed off paths, moved through underbrush, used streams to break her trail, but she was carrying stolen Confederate battle plans. If caught, thousands would die. Then she heard the sound that meant capture: howling hounds. After an hour of hard travel, she heard dogs barking behind her. The search had begun. She found a large oak tree with branches extending over a stream. Climbing up about 20 feet, she dropped into the water. The technique broke her scent trail, but she was still miles from Union lines. Late in the afternoon, she climbed a tall tree to get her bearings. From the top, she could see smoke rising from what looked like a military camp about 3 miles north. Confederate cavalry approached through the woods below. 6 men on horseback, searching for tracks. They passed underneath her tree. "Trail goes cold about a quarter-mile back," one said. "If she gets word to the Yankees about our positions, the attack could be compromised." After the patrol disappeared, Harriet climbed down and began working her way north. As evening approached, she finally saw blue uniforms, a Union picket line about 500 yards ahead. She waited until dark, then began her final approach. "Halt! Who goes there?" a sentry called out. "Friend," she called back. "Harriet Tubman with intelligence from Confederate camp. Advance slowly and be recognized." As she walked toward the Union position, Harriet Tubman felt the weight of stolen documents against her chest. Her hands were trembling from exhaustion. She'd done it. Against all odds, she'd made it back with intelligence that could save thousands. Then came the suspicion that almost destroyed everything. The officer looked at her like she was lying. "Lieutenant," she said desperately, "I have battle plans showing a coordinated attack scheduled for dawn tomorrow. If you don't believe me, at least look at the documents." The lieutenant studied her for a long moment, then made the decision that would determine whether her mission succeeded. "Escort this woman to headquarters. Send word to General Hunter, our top commander, that we may have intelligence." General Hunter, when he examined the stolen documents, recognized their value. "This is extraordinary intelligence," he told his staff. "We can repel their attack and counterattack." The next morning, at exactly 4 a.m., the Confederate attack began just as the documents indicated. But instead of finding sleeping Union soldiers, they found prepared positions with artillery aimed at their approach routes. The battle was over in 3 hours. The Confederate attack was repelled and turned into a rout. The intelligence that Harriet Tubman had risked her life to gather saved the Union position in South Carolina and ended Confederate control of the region. One woman disguised as a refugee had prevented what could have been a Confederate strategic victory that might have changed the course of the war. Years later, when Harriet was asked about her Civil War intelligence work, she downplayed her role. "I just did what was needed," she would say. But those who knew the full story understood she had accomplished something extraordinary. She had infiltrated a heavily guarded enemy camp, stolen crucial intelligence, and escaped through hostile territory. For Harriet Tubman, risking her life for others wasn't extraordinary. It was just what she did. And that's how a woman from Maryland became one of the most effective intelligence operatives of the American Civil War. What do you think you would have done in Harriet's position when that Confederate guard was approaching her hiding spot? Would you have tried to run, or would you have stayed and hoped your disguise would hold? If this story moved you, please leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.